Hello and welcome again. Welcome to our third lecture together. I hope that you are already started to see the previous lectures, discuss the points, and read the issues from this lecture. Upon we're going to have like a couple of questions in the end of each lecture. It could, in a way or another, facilitate our mission together and help you and me to brainstorm all the concepts and the issues that we need to talk about. So, ready? Let's start our new lecture together. While we used to talk about definitions, aspects, features in the previous lectures, today we're going to talk about types of democracy. So, ready? Let's start. Types of democracy. Types of democracy actually depends on the previous definitions. We might say that the structure of the government or the political system is the core element that determines the pattern and the types of democracy. The broadest differentiation that scholars make between democracies is based on the nature of representative government. There are two categories in general: direct democracy and representative democracy. We can identify certain examples in both world today. We can give explanation for each of the patterns. But the important point that I want you to know that at certain point these types are not accurate 100%. Like at certain age or era, you might have this country as a dictator state, as a democratic direct state, or indirect. So it's gonna be relevant to the progress of this community, the progress of the state, the economic, cultural, and political structure of this community. But in an abstract way, we can agree that we have certain types, and we're going to talk about these types in a minute. Okay, let's first discuss what do we mean by direct democracy. First, direct democracy was the most ancient one, is the simple, very clear, no very controversial issues among it. Maybe it doesn't exist anymore in the previous shape, but we could never ever discuss democracy without talking about direct democracy. So direct democracy places all power in the hands of the individuals. When political decisions must be made, all members of a polity gather together and individuals cast a vote. In theory, this sounds like the ideal situation for any community, but as we said, it doesn't exist anymore because the communities emerge. We have like millions of citizens. We have like a very complicated, complex context of political, economic context. And if we're gonna wait like to gather all the citizens in one place in one time to take one decision, we will never ever be able to take any decision. Direct democracy also refers to the landscape where there are no intermediates. There is no in between the government and the people. Each person is treated as an equal, and each person is given a chance to directly influence the policy making process. All people are involved in an equal distance from the decision makers and decision making process. Actually, we didn't have the term of decision makers at that point, and I want you just to remember very carefully, the direct democracy is the first phase shape of democracy ever. We don't have it anymore, but we need to talk about it to understand the progress of democracy in general. Okay, direct democracy in practice, however, the system is hard to implement historically. Small political communities tend to use direct democracies. In small towns or villages or communities where everyone knows everyone almost, where everyone knows each other. All of them are aware of their common needs, their common issues. They are sharing all the debates, all life aspects. They are living in one geographic area, very simple life pattern. It is definitely the track of direct democracy, um, where everyone knows one another and the issue under debate directly affect them, such, for example, an arrangement for farming or arrangement for buying products, etc., etc. The situation of direct democracy is the ideal situation for them. However, once there is an expansion in the size of communities and citizens, etc., as I mentioned a minute before, and the changing in the scope of politics and policy areas, direct democracy can become unwieldy. Many communities, countries used to have the pattern of direct democracy previously, but nowadays they don't. We might have direct democracy still in very small village, for example, who still like the number of the village no more than 100, but we couldn't call it a democracy actually because it's more a system to run the place or to run the village, but it is not a democracy as we can call it. To call it a democracy, it must refer, for example, to a country, a community, a nation, etc. Um, and it doesn't exist anymore. Let's talk, for example, in America today, thousands of laws are implemented and repealed on a daily basis. Imagine if we're gonna ask each citizen to participate in designing these decisions, life will stop and nothing will be designed or offering any solutions to people's needs or problems, actually. So, as a result of the insufficient role of direct democracy, politicians and decision makers, philosophers, etc., were trying to find a solution or an alternative model to run the relation between government, people, and the community in general. And the solution was to build a representative methodology, a representative model that can keep the core features of democracy, but still accelerate the process of decision making, actually accelerate the improvement of the communities and citizens. So representative democracy, as political communities change and evolve, so does our understanding of how democracy should be implemented. The second major type um, called representative democracy, as we said, as a result of the lack of sufficiency of direct democracy. They were trying to think, let's minimize the number of people who do participate in decision making, but keep everyone else there, but with various level of representation, like we're going to have direct people or citizens who are directly involved in decision making, while these people will be representing everyone else outside the circle. So representative democracy actually is a solution to the problems that emerge as a result of direct democracy. This political arrangement establishes as intermediate solution or a way to fix the problems out of the direct democracy. It is part of intermediary political actor between the individual and the policy outputs of the state. Through the electoral process, one person or a group of people are elected and assigned with the task of making decisions on behalf of other groups or citizens that they are represented in a way. Let's go back to, for example, United States. We have various levels of representation. We have like different firms. When we're going to talk about discussions of the firms, we're going to talk about how these structures were built and how the Constitution actually established for all of us. But what I want you to understand at this point, that representative democracy was the result of the problems of direct democracy. Actually, each state has two representatives in the upper house or Senate, in the lower house or House of Representatives. The number of these representatives appointed is based on the population size of each state. It is important to know that while the power of the individual is diminished slightly, political representatives are still beholden to the group that they are represent, also known as their um, backup, or what we can say constituency. They are the aspect of the community. They are reflecting their point of view, needs, issues, demands, problems, etc. In the United States, members of both of the House of Representatives and Senate face regular elections during which the public evaluates their performance. If citizens are pleased, satisfied with the performance, they will definitely re-elect the representatives. If not, definitely they will have the right to change them. This repetitive process creates a relation of accountability between voters and those they put into power. This election system defeat serves as a deterrent to the politicians' temptation to veer from the preferences of his or her constituency. The idea that people will have the decision again to change you if you fail, or if you didn't achieve your words, or if you don't represent their needs and cases in a very good way, definitely they will have the right to change you at a certain point. Maybe this is the ideal situation. We cannot say that this is exactly what happened on the ground, but at least that is how thinkers, scholars, philosophers were hoping things to change when they were trying to create solutions out of the direct democracy. Actually, when we are going to discuss the creation of these representatives, or the creation of the intermediary role, um, we are facing or confronting certain questions. Allow me to share with you a couple of these questions, and let's discuss these questions together. Number one, what does it really mean to be a representative of the interests of a collective of individuals? Like, are you only going to reflect their point of views, or you still have your merge of interference, and you are in a prior level maybe of mindset? Does this representation give you an authority to change the maybe point of view of your majority? The second question is, what if the set of policies that voters want doesn't really serve their interests? Like, who know who knows the best? Who can say this is the best for the community? And what would happen if people or citizens are demanding for certain norms or laws, for example, against the interest of the government or the country? If, for example, they are asking to delete the tasks, for example, or to stop paying for insurance, etc., etc. This is one of the very controversial relation between both the representatives and the people inside the country. The last question I want to raise with you, what should these representatives exactly do? Are they only going to transfer messages? Do they have other practical implementary role? Are they required to put plans and have certain interference in the strategic planning, for example? Actually, we might have like tens of questions, but let's minimize the questions into two actors. Actor number one, the real role of these representatives, and what kind of relation between these representatives and people. Like, do they need to see people regularly, or it would be yearly meeting, monthly meeting? I think all these questions will be very critical to explain the role of these representatives exactly inside the decision-making processes. Some scholars argue that it is responsibility of the elected representative to carry out the wishes of the people, the citizens, even if it harms them. This is known as the delegate model. In the delegate model, we are going to talk about the role of only transition, only a mirror role. They are only delegating certain missions, visions, without really having the role to change the perspective of people. And the delegate model is one of the most ancient and early model, actually, we might see in the representative model of democracy. On the other hand, on the other side, we have other scholars who argued that politicians are specialists, which means they are more aware and they have more experience and knowledge in certain issues that put them in a higher level than citizens. While voters continue to engage in their everyday lives, politicians are in the thick of congressional debates. They are in the middle of the process of building policy, economic. They are involved in each detail of the political economic life. They do understand the entire track, details, demands of progress and development of the state, which makes them more aware and capable to take decisions actually from the voters themselves. This tendency of scholars say or believes that these politicians are in a higher level than voters. They understand the increase and the cases and the implementation and maybe and the complexity of policies more than their voters. They can put much better good input than voters can do. So under certain conditions or circumstances, political leaders should be given the benefit of doubt. Like, voters must trust the decisions by these leaders or representatives because they do believe they have more access to the information and they are more involved in the political economic system. And this model is known as the trustee model. The trustee model doesn't mean that voter representatives' accountability is unimportant. Rather, it recognizes a way of less powerful role of the voters towards the leaders of the politicians themselves. They are saying because of the information, knowledge, experience these politicians have, they will gain the trust of the voters, and there will be a transparent relation between voters and these representatives, which makes them more capable to take decisions and lead the community to better future. One could argue that it is actually impossible to represent the interest of every voter. Consequently, all representatives are trustees, as they must make educated guesses about what their power base would want and should want. Sometimes representatives will be right, and sometimes they will be wrong. What is important is that we place our trust in their ability to make rational and well-informed decisions. The electoral process responds to a representative's failure, real or perceived, by most likely removing the representative from office. So again, the trustee model is talking about to give the trust to these who have the experience, access to information, and to those who we do trust they are capable to make better decisions for our interests. Let's talk about key points here about the direct and the representative democracy. Uh, and we might have like other shapes of or patterns. For example, we can talk about participatory democracy, which is a model of democracy in which citizens have the power to decide directly in policy, and politicians are responsible for implementing those policy decisions. Pluralist democracy is a model of democracy in which no one group dominates politics, and organized groups compete with each other to influence policies. Let's differentiate between participatory and pluralists. And participatory, they are talking about a level of participation where taking into consideration everyone in the context of representative, while pluralist democracy is talking about groups, not individuals. They are talking about separating communities into groups, majority, minorities, maybe pressure groups, etc., etc., who might be part of the decision making. And this model, as we said, will give no power for one particular group over others. It would be a parallel horizons of influence and a parallel level of participation between or among the groups towards the government. The last point or pattern we're going to talk about is the elite democracy. In this model, actually, we might see democracy within the hands of very small number of people who call themselves elite. Uh, we might have certain criteria for these elite to understand this in a better way. Before centuries, not everyone has the opportunity to be well educated or to join schools or universities or college. Not everyone has the access to the information. And as you know, most of the states used to be kingdoms, which means only few people are close to the king or close to the noble class. This was heralded in a way that we still have elite groups or classes, and they believe these elite people, either deriving from novel classification, bourgeois classification, or well-educated classification, or even economic classification, they still called elite. Under this model, they do believe that elite is more capable to lead the community because they have better skills, competencies, and experience. Thank you so much for joining me for this interesting lecture. I hope you are starting to build an idea about what are the core um, types of democracy. The first assignment or quiz, please give me two examples for direct and elite democracy. The second one, please give me an example for a very good indirect democracy. Thank you so much and see you soon.